Alright, how's it going, y'all? Today we're going to be talking about how to set up two-factor authentication on your Synology NAS. This way, even if a user's account is completely compromised, the adversary is still not going to be able to log into your Synology because they're not going to have the special key that is on the smartphone. It's a really good way to make sure that whoever is logging in is actually who they say they are. Alright, so first I'm going to go over what two-factor authentication is, and then honestly, should you implement it on your Synology NAS? It's not for everyone. So the way two-factor authentication works is it requires a user to have two different things, something they know and something they have. So the thing they know is their username and password. Then the thing that they have is what's generating or receiving the second factor authentication code. So this is generally a smartphone. So most users have had some form of two-factor authentication in their lives. Probably with your bank, you have to enter a text that you get sent after you log in on some devices. This way, the bank is verifying that not only does the person have the username and the password, but they also have access to the phone, which is something that's a lot harder to steal. In this day and age, with the prevalence of the internet, users could literally have hundreds or even thousands of different accounts. And there's no way people are going to remember all those different passwords. So people are going to use the same password. That is a fact of life. Another fact of life is some services are going to get compromised and passwords are going to get stolen. That's why two-factor authentication is great. Because even if someone's password does get stolen, their smartphone probably is not going to get stolen. And it makes breaking into accounts that you don't own so much more difficult. But in some instances, it can also make getting into accounts you own harder. Say you lose your smartphone. You're now going to have to go through a whole authentication process with a bunch of different services trying to get accounts you own back. It can be really hard to do. And a Synology NAS is no different. And that's part of the reason why you really should consider whether or not you should set up two-factor authentication on your Synology. And so the way that Synology has implemented two-factor authentication, it is not the text message that you receive from your bank. Instead, you have to download an app, such as Google Authenticator. Then, when you're implementing two-factor authentication, Synology has you input a code into that authenticator. That code is used to basically sync up your Synology and that authenticator. It tells the authenticator how to generate the future authentication codes. That way, you don't actually need a link between your Synology and your phone. Instead, they will both know what authentication codes to generate and use to verify. Basically, it uses incredibly complex algorithms that I am not going to go over because I really just do not fully understand them. The issue with this is, if you lose your device, you've lost your authentication. It's not like it's a text message that gets sent to your phone number. You are not going to be able to replace this authentication code, which is why you have to set up a recovery email. But that email account might not have worked. Remember, you are self-hosting this. Say Google has updated their policy and you're using Gmail to send these emails. And all of a sudden they go, oh, Synology is not secure enough to access our email servers. We're going to block Synologys from using OAuth. Well, maybe you don't find out about that because you never really receive emails. Now, all of a sudden, you need this two-factor authentication backup code, and the email account has been unlinked. What do? Well, you're honestly kind of out of luck. You're going to have to go through and do an administrative reset of your Synology. Now, this is not going to cause you to lose any data, but it's going to be a huge pain, and you're going to have to reconfigure a lot of things. This is why two-factor authentication on a Synology is really not necessary for everyone, because there are some downsides to it, and it could cause you a huge pain later on. I would not set this up if you're only going to be accessing your Synology locally or over a VPN, because quite frankly, it's overkill. So it really comes down to how you're using your Synology to see whether or not it's worth it for you. And either way, it's probably not a bad idea to have two different administrator accounts with authentication codes on two separate devices. This way, if one device is lost and the email server fails, you still have that backup method. This can be a tablet that you never use and you just have in a drawer, but if you need to turn it on, it'll have that authentication code in there. That's just one way you can mitigate the risk of two-factor authentication failing, but it really comes down to how comfortable you are with tech and making sure all of your devices are going to be working. All right, so now we've gone over two-factor authentication. Let's go over how to set it up on our Synology. So to do this, you're going to need three things. One, a Synology NAS. Two, a smartphone with the Google Authenticator app downloaded. You can also use other authenticator apps, but Google has one across all platforms and is pretty ubiquitous, though they all should be using the same algorithms, so they will generate the same codes. And finally, you're going to need an email account. I'm going to be doing this with Gmail. All right, so now let's set up two-factor authentication. The first thing you're going to want to go ahead and do is log into DSM, and you actually don't set up two-factor authentication from within Control Panel. Instead, you go over here to your user settings and go to Personal. And you click Enable Two-Step Verification. If this is the first time you've set this up, it'll say Email Notification System has not been set up. Please set it up. And so I'm going to be using Google because I've got a Gmail account. So click Google, Next. And say the sender name. And we're just going to leave that blank. And we're going to click Authenticate. And this is going to send us to OAuth 2 via Google, and so we're just going to log into our Google account. And just click Allow. All right, and so now authentication is done. The next thing we need to do is just click Apply, and we're going to click Two-Step Verification, and it's going to bring us to this menu. So first it's going to ask us for that recovery email address, and so make sure it's one that you have access to. And so now all we need to do is scan this barcode into our Authenticator app. So open up the Authenticator app, and the first time it's going to say Begin Setup. We're just going to say Scan Barcode, access the camera, and it was just that quickly. It read the barcode and figured out what the shared keys are going to be. And so now it's going to have us enter the Authenticator code. So enter that now. And just like that, it's enabled. All right, and so now let's test it out. We're going to go ahead and log out of DSM. And let's log back in. So now it's going to have us enter that Authenticator code. So every time you'll go ahead and open up the app, and we can even say, remember this device. Just like that, it worked. So now really quickly, let's do a test and see what happens when these things go wrong. So I'm going to click Stop Remembering This Device, close it, and we're going to log out again. And let's see what happens if we do not have our phone. So I'm going to go ahead and log in again. But now let's say that we lost our phone. Let's click it. And so now it's going to go ahead and send an email to our email account. All right, and so now I've just gotten the recovery email, and it's actually a 8-digit PIN. We're just going to copy it and enter it in. So now that worked. And so we were able to successfully get in using our backup email account. And I would actually make sure to test this every once in a while, because you never know when you're going to lose your smartphone, and you don't want to run into an issue where all of a sudden you've lost your phone. Oh, and wait, your recovery email address no longer works. All right, and so that's all there is to it. You've now got two-factor authentication hooked up, and I've shown you how to use the recovery email. Go ahead and leave any other tutorials you'd like to see me make in the comments below. And stay tuned for that security tutorial I'm going to be doing soon. All right, have a good one. Bye.